and my diligent's just gone to sleep. Bear with me a second. Tēnā tātou te whānau. Welcome to this Policy and Planning Committee hui. We have on Zoom Charlotte and Tuhiao. Tēnā kōrua. Welcome to all the committee members from around the rohe. And Lisa is on Zoom too. Welcome, Lisa. We have apologies today from Celine from STDC, Barley from NPDC, and Grant has to leave us earlier today. So can I have a mover for the apologies, please? Thank you, Alan and Susan. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Okay, thank you. If we can move to the confirmation of the minutes of the Policy and Planning Committee on the 10th of June, page 4. I'd like to move confirmation of those minutes. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Neil. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? It's carried. Tēnā tātou. Just before we move into the agenda items, can I please hand the time to Steve to go take us through some of the recent announcements by the government regarding future work programs relevant to...
Do you want to do that under... well, actually, no, maybe I'll do that before we go into item 5. It's probably relevant, isn't it, Finbar? Which is a submission of the national direction. So at the local government conference last week, you may have seen some coverage where the Minister for RMA Reform announced a freeze on any new planning notifications and indicated that freshwater plans will not be able to be notified before December 2027. Now that process affects two pieces of work we have underway. First, the simpler piece is the coastal plan change that you signed off on back in February or March this year, which is particularly an issue with the marine mammal zone down the west coast, which potentially affects some of our infrastructure activities, including port dredging activities. But we are engaging in consultation with discussions with iwi at the moment about that plan change process and what that means. Now that means that that plan change cannot be proceeded with without permission from the minister. So there'd be an extra step in the process here we'd need to work through if we did continue to desire a plan change process, and given the economic impacts, pretty straightforward argument. The broader issue of freshwater plan changes, you may again recall last year they decided to place a moratorium on any plan notifications until the earlier of when they notify new freshwater NVS or December 2025. Now they are nowhere near, when they made that decision, they were anticipating they would have a draft NPS out for consultation in the first quarter of this year. Rather, what we got was a broader consultation document, which Finbar will take you through our proposed submission response to that now. So what they announced last Wednesday was that no freshwater plan changes should be progressed until December 2027. But it's important to recognise, and they are going to implement amendments to the RMA to enable that to happen, which is important because previously, while there had been political suggestions from ministers that we shouldn't progress with plan changes until the announcement at the end of last year, of course we continue to have a statutory obligation to implement national policy direction as rapidly as reasonably practical. And indeed, we received letters from external NGOs reminding us of that statutory obligation, which created a conflict between the law being threatened for judicial review for failing to meet the law and ministers saying, ignore the law, in effect. Now they are proposing to amend the RMA again to say that no freshwater plan change document should be progressed before December 27, which is good because that takes away the legal requirement around implement it as soon as reasonably practical.
Puts law into their thoughts.
Which is good, and obviously that goes through the parliamentary process when the bill goes through its second reading, which I think is due to report back soon. That's probably up on the timetable better than me. Now, what's also important to recognise, though, is it's only the notification stage. What shouldn't stop, and this is quoting from a Ministry for the Environment fact sheet that was attached to the Minister's release, work that councils do before notifying change should not stop. So don't stop thinking, don't stop doing the planning, work out how you are addressing the particular practical issues you have to address in your region and how you might best achieve that. And I would suggest that a lot of the solutions, what's practical on the ground, the speed at which farmers, for example, can pick up on good farming practice, will not at all be impacted by what might happen in Wellington and in the legislation. So what is important is that we carry on and do some work and some thinking on what does good practice look like, what's the speed of change we can realistically expect to achieve in Taranaki to address the particular issues we have. So look, what again, and in some ways that pause, if you like, on notification process is not unhelpful. Because we are getting to the stage where there are some really difficult conversations and some difficult issues to work our way through. And just at a staff level, we've had some really good discussions in the last wee while about how we grapple with some of those gnarly issues, things like water allocation and the speed with which good farming practices. Do we want to continue in the encouragement and education type phase, or do we need to get tougher on regulations? Those are the sorts of issues that ultimately we need to grapple with, and indeed you had some good discussions on dairy farm effluent discharges through this committee over the last two meetings, which are a good teaser for some of the really tough issues that are going to have to come here at some stage. So what we are, the sort of position and full position we've got to at a staff level at the moment, given those announcements last week, is we will use the opportunity and the extra time we're going to have to pause and reflect on where we are at. We do think it is important we maintain the momentum we've got at the moment in terms of working out what are the big issues, what are the sorts of solutions we have. But we will, and so we should carry on with the discussions that are on today's agenda. We are, though, thinking that we were planning to have just another couple of items come to you in August, which includes issues like water allocation, which is to be honest, in the really hard category for us, even at the staff level at this stage. So we've got more work to do. It would be a challenge for us to get that up to a space for you for August. So we're going to pause that work, and then we'll re-engage with the new council probably early 2026 on here's a good stock take of where we're at, here's the suggested process for going forward to progress some of our work on the land and water plan process. What that gets us through the election period, and that will just get new council induction with a bit more breathing space and time, whereas we were planning on quite extensive inductions on around fresh water in that October to December period, which is quite a busy time anyway. We'll now push that back into the new year. That will also give us the advantage of hopefully seeing the draft new RMA replacement legislation, which is due to be introduced to the House in the last quarter of this year, third to fourth quarter. So another 2 to 3 months, hopefully we'll see the draft legislation, and that will give us a good feel for, so what is the new spatial planning and the new environment chapter going to look like in the new planning regime, and how will those things interact with the sorts of themes we've seen in the national direction documents for the future. So we are hopeful that, or believe that should give us a good view of what the future planning document might look like versus what we currently know about in terms of the RMA and the current freshwater EPS in particular. So that's our thinking, we should carry on doing our thinking and our work, and indeed it's also important that we carry on thinking about spatial planning processes and those other bigger issues that need to be addressed from a regional perspective, because the nature again of those and what's practical doesn't change in terms of what's going on, and indeed, the sorts of issues that were raised in the Ops Committee about wastewater improvement that may be needed as a critical infrastructure requirement for growth. And clearly, there are some very clear growth expectations which can't happen without the wastewater schemes that can have the capacity to service the communities connected to them, no matter what the rainfall. And so those are some of the issues we need to that will also need to be worked through. And that NPDC's plans for investment in wastewater schemes aren't going to change because of a pause in planning frameworks and what they need to do and what they can afford to do, all those sorts of things. So we can re-engage in those sorts of issues as well because they affect us. So that's our thinking at the moment. So, and as I said, in summary, we'll bring back some fresh thinking and a process going forward in February, March next year. Once we've seen hopefully we should have a draft MPS by then as well as legislation that says here's the broad framework for the new planning documents that need to exist. So that should enable us to proceed forward with a greater level of certainty about the hurdles we have to climb in relation to freshwater, but we don't want to lose the momentum and the grappling with the things that we're proposing to do in the short term. So we're happy to take any questions.
Peter?
Thank you, Peter. Would the Minister's announcement have any impact or effect on the Waitara River setting?
Yes, in my view it does. And I suspect there will need to be some engagement with iwi as part of their treaty settlements. But look, that's my take on it. But obviously that's for the government to decide that and work with iwi on it.
Any other questions, Donna?
Just on, why December 27? Did they give any reason? Because it's a long way off, isn't it?
It's a very long way off. When you look back, it's 14 years, I think, since the first plan change, 15 PS FM was notified, and our plan's now 24 years old. And another 3 years from now, it'll be 27 years old. And we know there are some parts that...
Let's do it more than once.
Yeah, well, there's been, so we talk about cost of stop-start processes.
That the continued work stream will allow to modify and
why-
adjust when the final things come
Which
out.
is why I think, we've invested a lot of resource in getting to where we are. In my view, the worst thing we could do is just stop and pack it all away.
Yeah, agree.
We need to,
Well, the trajectory we are on makes sense.
yes,
So why wouldn't
Yes.
we continue to
Yes.
act in a manner
yeah.
consistent?
Do it properly because we've got time.
But we've got a bit more time, so let's do some more analysis, let's do some more informal consultation and engagement with the stakeholder groups that need to be involved, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, Donna, again?
It would be good if we didn't have, like this meeting, it's got a hell of a lot in it and some quite big implications. But, it's a lot for 2 hours and it's a lot to get your head round as a councillor. It would be good if we could slow down, the introduction of some of this stuff so we could really think about the implications and do it well.
Well, we can look to that, induction period too, making sure we cover all those critical areas. I think. Yeah. Any more questions for Steve at this point? Kia ora, Steve, thank you. Finbar, can we invite you to the hot seat, please? And just before we kick off, I just want to mention, coming back to your point, Donna, that we've got a couple of hours. I'm going to be brutal today, whānau. If I don't hear a question within the first 5 seconds, I will interject and ask you what your question is, so that we can keep the agenda moving. This is some meaty information, so we'll get through that. And also just noting, if I can, my conflict of interest regarding any discussions around taumata arawai before we kick off Finbar. Thank you.
Thank you, through Chair. In the interest of a long agenda, I'll keep this brief.
Kia ora.
I'll take the paper as read. I just wanted to highlight a couple of little, big things, but short. These are big consultation documents. We are very aware of that. They are very technical. there's, except for a few points, most of these are down in the weeds of the regulations, and you'll see that in the content of our submission. Great for planning nerds like me, keeps us busy, but I appreciate some of it is pretty technical, but we can answer any questions. I just wanted to emphasise there's 3 consultation documents that we've commented on. The infrastructure and the primary sector ones, the next we see them, they'll have legal effect. So this is the only chance to input into those ones. The freshwater one is an initial discussion document, and the government has said they will come out with an actual draft NPS freshwater for further consultation later in the year. So we will get another go at providing input into that when we can see actual changes rather than just broad questions. Yeah, and look, I'll just leave it there. Very happy to take any questions. As I said, there's a lot in there, and we'll do our best to walk you through it.
Oh, thank you for that's awesome. Donald.
Through you, Madam Chair, page 14, I see with glee that you're talking about removing the nitrogen caps, which I'm very encouraged by. But I do see the package 4 there.
Is there a question, Donald?
Pardon?
Is there a question?
Yes. A package for growing for growth. Is that a new way of spelling grow? Go.
So that's maybe just through you, Chair, me having the primary sector on the brain as opposed to housing development. So we haven't commented on that one last year, leaving it just talk about building houses. But yeah, good catch.
Any other questions?
Yes, Madam
Peter?
Chair. I was just noticed the comment about the weak language in regards to tangata whenua, but I didn't note, and hopefully you can point me to it, I didn't note where there was any offering of stronger language in this.
That's true, through you, Chair. We haven't suggested any alternative drafting. I think some of it's hopefully relatively clear to ministry officials where you just delete a singular word and then it gets stronger language. But yeah, that's a good point. We haven't suggested alternative drafting.
Will you be adding any?
We can
Suggestions?
subject to the discussion here, I guess, in terms of what alternative drafting might be appropriate. So I'll just have a look at it.
Or perhaps some consultation with iwi reps around some of that languaging might be able to be had. In the meantime, Tuhia.
Kia ora. So this isn't questions, but my understanding is that we were allowed to offer some slight changes to the submissions. Is that correct?
Be consistent, Madam.
I am. Yep, she said. Is that correct? That was a question.
So the
So-
question was, can
We offer some slight changes.
yes, absolutely. That's the point of this discussion.
Okay, sorry, just check. I just have 3 tiny ones. There's a few mentions of economic growth. I was wondering if we could actually use the word sustainability instead of growth, because there's a whole lot of, issues with that concept. The second one was, this was around the electricity transmission sections. Just if there could be maybe something mentioned around burying power lines, because this is kind of standard practice in, Europe and places like that, but we don't really do that here, and I think it would be good to see a bit of a shift towards that in certain places. And the last one was there's comments around low value wetlands, degraded wetlands, and suggesting that they could be, I can't remember the word, but like excluded, I suppose. And I don't really agree with that, because I think we've already lost most of our wetlands, and there's also an important role for even low value and degraded wetlands around climate resilience with flooding and drought. So if that could be adjusted, thanks.
Response, Fimba?
Through you, Chair. With regards to economic growth versus sustainability, we can definitely add those references in. To be honest, part of the reason why we don't reference sustainability, because it is not in the parlance of the current government, and the focus very much is on economic growth, and part of these submissions is always tailoring it to the reality of the government in power in terms of some of that communication to kind of get you over the line on some of your more practical changes with regards to actual drafting and things like that. But if there's a strong desire from the committee, we're happy to add that in, or just potentially and sustainability. It's pretty easy.
Or sustainable economic growth?
Yeah.
Do they have to be mutually exclusive?
No, it does not. We can add that in easily. Funnily enough. With regards to electricity transmission and burying power lines, again, it can be something that can be encouraged. It's not really, I would say, that it would require a chunky economic analysis to require that in national direction, as it would be very expensive. However, there would be no harm in pointing out that it could be something that could be better provided for, noting the potential costs. And with regards to low-value wetlands, again, this is something that's probably more of a tactical choice in terms of the submission. The reality is the government will be walking back the wetland provisions. I don't think anything we say will change that. And so it is a question of how do we, again, word our submission based on the realities of the people in power to try to get the kind of concessions that we want to protect the things that are most important in terms of those wetlands, which are the real big one, the significant ones.
Okay. Thank you. Just before I come to you, Donna, because my question was always also around wetlands. Do we highlight in our submission the number of wetlands or the percentage of wetlands that we've already lost to highlight the significance of the problem for us here in Taranaki?
We can definitely do that.
Okay. Would that be good to hear? Okay, kia ora. Donna?
I actually agree with some of the induced wetlands that were included. It was ridiculous in the legislation, and I think it caused more farmers not to do work that they would have done, then it became a negative impact. So, and if we want
Question, Donna?
Sorry?
Have we got a question?
Well, I'm just kind of having a counter to that probably, and I think that's fair.
Thank you. Cool. Any other questions for Whamba as we move
Madam
through?
Chairman, I don't think we need to actually have a question with every comment that a councillor makes, but we're trying to contribute to
I understand
the submission, and quite often that's not a question, it's a submission to the writer.
Kapai, fair enough. But again, I am trying to keep this.
I hear you,
considering
but
the
don't
huge
stifle conversation.
Kapai. Any other kōrero question, Donna?
I would like some sort of compensation when land is taken for wetland, or some help in fencing, and so, because it is private land that people have bought and have a mortgage against. So that's not a question, it's a statement.
Kapai.
Through you, Chair, just
So can we clarify if that's going to be added that the ratepayers pay and the council staff need to do some policy work on
If
how
the
compensation
public,
scheme would fund it?
if it's private land,
I'm not arguing, I'm just asking the question about how far do you
Well,
want it? Are you proposing that the
my-
staff submission or the council submission be changed to include that point? And does that go to the compensation piece and the ratepayer paying for it? If we're advocating that that should be added to the NPS, so no, the government's answer will be on that. It's a local benefit, local cost.
Through you, Chair, two points. So we did canvass this question when we had the submissions on the regulatory standards bill that was brought before Policy Planning Committee. Councillor Cram acknowledging your point. So in that submission, we did address this and highlighted that it's bloody complicated, but and it is something that needs to be worked through in slower time if the government is serious about pursuing this. But currently, my understanding is that there's not the powers to do that under the RMA. And then in terms of the non-regulatory methods, we can very easily add something into the submission, just emphasising the importance of non-regulatory mechanisms to support people to do these things without going into too much detail of
that
who
sounds
pays.
fair.
Peter?
Am I correct, Madam Chair, in that at a previous meeting, conversations were stifled under another chair, and yet at this meeting, where it's being suggested that conversation shouldn't be stifled, I find it, do you find that unusual, Madam Chair?
Kapai. I've taken the point on that conversations shouldn't be stifled. I will still try to direct our conversations to salient points and questions to enable us to move through the agenda today. As we noted, we've only got limited time today because we've got another meeting this afternoon. So I'll do my best to manage everyone's perspectives today. Is that okay with everybody? Here we go. Donna?
I mean, do you just think there's too much in this agenda? And
Well, that's an issue that we'll need to talk about that I can take offline with management. just a timing issue with the amount of work we've got in front of us, really. Some of it's unavoidable.
We are grappling with as an organisation.
No, but
Yeah.
this is really important, and so it needs the time, whereas the other is the fresh water that's.
As are all the issues on this agenda, and we have tight timeframes to meet.
But we haven't got tight timeframes on the fresh water, Steve.
We've got tight timeframes today. Can we have this discussion perhaps over lunch when we're not taking up our meeting time? That would be really helpful. Any other comments or questions for Finbar? Good. Thank you, Finbar.
Is it all right if I just quickly double check that I've got everything in terms of
Yes,
the changes
please.
to the
Please
submission?
do.
So we will provide some suggestions on language with regards to tangata whenua in terms of probably just some pretty targeted changes there. Is the committee comfortable if Steve can sign off on that, or do people want to see that again? We've got reasonably tight timeframes in terms of approving our submission, I think, by the end of the week.
I'd be satisfied with Steve signing off.
Good point.
Is in line.
And then we've got references to sustainable economic growth added in some language around exploring and burying of cables, highlighting the amount of wetlands that we've lost in Taranaki, highlighting the importance of non-regulatory support on a number of measures. I think those were the key points, right, in this discussion, in terms of changes to the submission.
Everybody okay with those?
Like the whole fresh water thing, and do we, the ecology of the water, is that more important than the, the science that but it's just too big a topic to talk about, and, I think we've just got to go.
This is not the final bill, this is just a discussion
Yeah.
document, so.
But, because we've gone with the legislation to this point, but is there a different way that we might want to look at things?
Through you, Chair, when we get the actual draft of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater, that's definitely something we can explore, and we'll have the benefit of it not being about 300 pages of combined discussion documents. It'll just be one.
I think that what we really are saying here is, in fact, the whole process that the government is asking us to do is just too quick. I think it's the 7th of July or something, it's supposed to be something like that, whenever it is. So again, if you want to do a serious piece of work on something like this, you've got to have time to really look at it. And really, I mean, what we're doing here is we're basically rubber stamping with a few small changes what you've done. And then nothing wrong with that, but I'm just making the point that we're just spectators, quite frankly.
Can I have a mover? Craig, thank you. A seconder? I'll second. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against?
No.
You want your vote recorded, Leader?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Fine. Thank you, team. Finbar again.
Pardon?
No, she voted against.
But do we know what?
Do we need to ask why?
No.
No?
We don't really, but I mean, this is how the whole process is.
Do you, actually, can I, Leader, do you want to explain why? I'm happy for that to happen if that's totally your call.
Sure, I'd be happy to explain why. It's been 3 hours. As much as there is some really great stuff in this mission, the freshwater piece is just so far outside of the great plans. We'd be much more interested in a balanced approach. Communities really asked to think about the nuances of social, economic impacts of environment. Yeah, there's so many things. Would courtesy reporting removed? Yeah, there's real problems.
Any response? But no, thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Can we move on to item number 6? That's Finbar again, the Mayoral Forum and Hydrogen submission, page 204.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. This submission is for your noting. The government released a discussion document, a very high-level discussion document, one of the most high-level I've seen in a while, on orange and white hydrogen. White hydrogen is hydrogen that potentially occurs naturally in the ground. Orange hydrogen is where you pump stuff into the ground and natural minerals turn it into hydrogen. It is very, very early days, and you'll see that the submission from the Mineral Forum acknowledges that, essentially saying if you're going to regulate it, first point of call is the Crown Minerals Act, which is what they kind of point to in the submission. But you would absolutely need RMA regulation as well, and that you need to invest a bunch of time and effort into figuring out how that would actually work, and also scoping out if there is actually a reasonable economic resource here to be kind of tapped into. And I would note as well that as soon as we get any actual detail on what such a regime would look like, we will bring it before this committee for more substantive discussion. But that I expect will be some time away.
Peter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at, and I'm not sure what page it is. I think it's after page 9. There's a map that shows the country. And I don't understand what the green and the orange brownie things are. What do they represent?
Through you, Chair, they're just two different geological formations in terms of the rocks, which we might find natural hydrogen or could be potentially used to make orange hydrogen.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Grant?
Just through you, Chair, it's page 218.
218.
What Peter's talking. And just through you, Chair, as well, just with the Mineral Forum submission, had they had involvement with Mana Whenua before they wrote the submission?
Through you, Chair, so the drafting of the submission was led by NPDC, and I am aware that they did engage with Ngā iwi o Taranaki in terms of the organisation, and there was a bit of discussion there in terms of...
Cool. Tuhiao, and then Susan.
Yeah, thanks. So I just noted there was mention from Ngā iwi o Taranaki, but I didn't see that, sorry. So my comment was just that I think if we are going to look at this again, not just the submission, but if this comes back to us, I really think that iwi will not be supporting having hydrogen come under the Crown Minerals Act, because that will be seen as another raupatu. So just highlighting that this needs to go to the iwi if this comes back to the table.
Susan?
I just want to understand the Mineral Forum. What is its status? What does it do? I may have missed the point here somewhere.
Craig?
Well, don't they consider regional issues together?
Yes.
And regional advocacy.
Through you, Chair, from just in terms of an officer perspective, when we are looking at potential submissions, we find the Mineral Forum is particularly useful when the thing that is being consulted on, one, has little actual detail, and it's more of a kind of advocacy-related submission.
So blue sky?
Yeah, in that space. Or it's related to a bill where there's like very little practical implications for us in terms of our regulatory functions, but there is an advocacy role there in terms of wanting to engage and kind of champion the region, I guess. That's where, at least when we're looking at these things, that's when we go, oh, the Mineral Forum could be a good avenue for that submission.
Like we had the Ngā iwi Forum.
Collective voice, potentially more impact. Donna?
It would be just good if it states that it hasn't, that the submission hasn't been to the elected members, the other elected members.
Before submissions are made, is that what you're saying?
Or just on the submission, that it is only the 4 people involved, and that it hasn't gone
Council.
Through
council.
As the full council's involved. Before people.
We didn't see Chair.
So Donna, are you asking for that to be something that happens in the future, or something that's noted on future
It's got all
submissions?
the logos on it, but it hasn't actually come through a committee.
So how do we address that? Because this happens a lot, where the Mineral Forum, or not a lot.
So I think that's a matter for the triennial agreement. The reality is the Mineral Forums nowhere have any formal status. It's not established as a formal joint committee, which is the way in which it would need to be formed, and delegations given by each of the 4 councils to do this. At the moment, you have 4 elected leaders who, and it's, I'm just looking briefly at the triennial agreement. I thought it might have been in there, but I don't think it is from what I can see quickly. So, but Mineral Forums up and down New Zealand operate in the way, rather than going through the process of trying to go back to 4 councils, then trying to reconcile differing perspectives from 4 different councils on speaking on behalf of the region. So there is a valid issue there of, no, the mayoral form has no formal mandate, never has, but it continues to represent the region in the best it can with the four individual elected leaders.
So I understand correctly that if individual elected members took exception to the proposed submission, then they're obviously able to articulate that position, aren't they?
Well, if this council was to disagree with the reply forward by the mayoral forum, it could pass a resolution to that effect, and we would simply pass that back to the mayoral forum, saying TRC disagrees.
Okay. So I guess there's 2 questions. Oh, sorry, Grant, you go.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Well done, Steve. Yeah, answered some concerns I've had for a long time. Firstly, I personally don't believe that the mayoral forum should have any of the logos on the top. This is a group that is putting a collective Taranaki view to promote economic growth and stuff like that. So that's my first concern, that I actually have it. And secondly, that it should actually go to every elected member. So then they're actually in the know before it is actually released. Not that it'll change anything, but I don't believe that it should have the logos on. That's just my personal view. But I have brought it up before, and I hear what you're saying, Donna, but absolutely hear what you're saying, Steve. And I'd like the idea of them promoting, but I don't believe that they should be having the logos of every council, because that may not be the necessary view of every single person.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
if the logos are on there, there's a statement at the bottom that states that it's only the view of those.
Well, I think it's best picked up in the triennial.
Yes.
We're about
Yes.
to the end of triennial.
Yeah, that's okay.
There will be a new triennial agreement negotiated. That is the time for all 4 councils through their normal governance structures, not individual councils alone, because as individual councils you have no authority.
Yep.
To agree on what scope, if any, you wish to give to the mayoral forum, and indeed whether you even wish to participate in it as a decision for the new council to make following the elections.
Because just on that point, this agreement would have gone through this council will sign off.
Yes. Yeah. The triennial agreement went through all councils and was signed off.
2 issues raised. Obviously, this last matter that we've been debating, so we'll refer that forward to the new triennium for that agreement to be revisited. And as mentioned, that does come back to our council for sign off. So we've allowed this to happen this term. If we're not happy with that, then we address it getting into the next term. But coming back to the matter at hand, the submission, do we have any disagreement? Can I ask for a mover that the submission be confirmed? Thank you, Susan. Seconder? Thank you, Donald. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Kia ora, Whanda. Thank you. So, Steve, you'll take that forward and carry that forward for us?
I've got this regional
Okay, thank you.
Regional CEs on Thursday, we'll flag it there.
And moving on to item 7, submission on the South Taranaki District Council Plan Change 4. We have Lisa, and it looks like you're as cold as we are, Lisa. So welcome.
Oh, yeah.
It is very cold over here. Kia ora, everybody. I'll keep this brief. This is a paper regarding a submission that staff are proposing to submit to South Taranaki District Council on their Plan Change 4, which they've notified about 6 weeks ago. Submissions closed today, so pending your decision, I guess, on this item, staff can submit the draft submission that's attached to the item. Effectively, Plan Change 4 for South Taranaki District Council is a targeted change to their subdivision and structure planning components of their operative district plan. It makes a lot of sense, I guess, from staff's perspective in terms of it's really trying to take a stronger policy direction to improve sustainable growth. There are a couple of areas where we feel like they could strengthen their policy direction, and they relate to the matters, I guess, that intersect with regional councils' role. And they're in the submission. Effectively, we want them to be a little bit clearer around reminding applicants that often subdivisions also require consents from regional councils and come to talk to regional council as soon as possible. rather than late in the game. The second point being that just trying to get ahead of climate change impacts on water supply and potential stormwater flooding risk is to require people to be putting in stormwater holding tanks in new subdivision areas. And then the last point is just to be more explicit about the integration of public transport and active transport modes in new subdivision areas. So pretty targeted submission from staff's perspective. Happy to take any questions or queries people might have.
Any questions, Donald?
Through you, Madam Chair, I had the thought about the stormwater storage. Should there be a volume required, or is that too detailed? The amount of storage.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we haven't put a volume in the submission. I guess the structure plans that are subject, or the subdivision chapter of the district council plan and their structure plans have a whole range of different uses and sizes of allotments, I guess, that are being prepared. So I guess the size might be dependent on that kind of detail. So it might not be one size fits all, which would be the difficulty, I guess, in suggesting a certain size at this point in time.
Yeah, you could have a 44-gallon drum for a warehouse, or a 30,000 milliliter tank for a domestic house.
Through you, Chair, perhaps we could potentially update the submission to maybe, rather than referring a specific size, but we could refer to something along the lines of, a size reflective of the allotment or use, or something like that, that might then maybe take your point, Councillor McIntyre, around that there'll be different needs for different uses.
Is everybody happy with that? I think that's a really pragmatic way to address that.
And I was just on the transport issue. Are you talking about advocating for the provision to be able to provide public transport? Because I note in Hara they don't have any at this stage.
Through you, Chair, no, it's more that objective talks about subdivision needing to create safe and integrated transport networks. We want that outcome to include the consideration of public and active transport provision. Public and active transport provision is not necessarily about saying that public transport must be in these areas. It's just making sure that if you're thinking about transport in an integrated way, you're not excluding the future provision or the future opportunities that public or active transport modes could actually bring.
Okay.
It's not a statement of provision of service.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Lisa, I just note, and I can't find it right off the top of my head, I thought I noted it, the reference to problems down the line when consultation hasn't been made with TRC earlier. Are there any conversations? Because when I was at SDDC, we had the same issue from the other side of the fence about TRC coming in late or not early enough or things like that. Are staff having more joined up conversations to prevent this?
Yes, yeah, through you, Chair. Since I've been at council, we've and the policy team and the consents team have been doing 6 weekly catch up with our relevant policy consent managers, so that we're trying to flag issues when they come up early. And that's, speaking on behalf of consent colleagues, I guess that's where they have been able to flag some of these issues, particularly with their consent colleagues in the other councils, of if people are coming in for subdivision and they're not aware that they might actually also need a consent through TRC, flag to them as early as possible, because we don't know about it until it hits our desk, that they should be coming to us. And actually a joint process is preferred in terms of individual processes, but joint conversations between the two councils can actually be a preferred way forward for those applicants as well.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Can I have a mover, please, for the recommendations on page 228? Thank you, Grant. Seconder. Thank you, Alan. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you, Lisa.
Not a problem.
Kia ora. We're now on to item 8, the suspension of standing orders to allow us to have full and frank conversation, land and freshwater workshops, page 242. I'll move that we do so. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Susan. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, who have we got up for that? Change my page. Oh, Lisa again. Lucky us. Over to you, Lisa.
Not a problem. This is the standing freshwater implementation update. Now, just taking and acknowledging all the conversation we had at the start of the meeting, I suppose, on the recent government directions. This paper was obviously prepared prior to us knowing that, but we have I guess this paper is a little bit different to the previous ones you've received in that we have added a little bit more detail to give you an update on some of the topics that we are working away on, so that when we do come back and bring them to you for kind of formal approval, you've had a little bit of a taster, I suppose, of the topics as they come. So hopefully that might start to address some of Councillor Cram, your concerns around bigger, meatier topics, that this gives you a little bit of insight and some of the stuff staff's working away at the moment. So on that, I won't go into too much detail, but I'm happy to answer questions. This paper includes an overview of 2 topics, being outstanding water bodies and the work that we're doing for the Beds, Lakes and Rivers chapter, or BEDS chapter as we refer to it. It's a bit of a mouthful otherwise. Effectively, in a nutshell, I guess the work we're doing on outstanding water bodies is they are a framework that have been required under national direction for quite some time. We currently have 3 outstanding water bodies in our existing plan and RPS, but there's been a lot of work and a lot of done by other councils and even some recent Environment Court decisions around outstanding water bodies. So we do need to revisit the criteria around what we put into the plan, and also to potentially future-proof our plan that perhaps there might be other water bodies in the future that might need to be considered as outstanding. So we're working through that at the moment. We've got draft criteria attached to this paper. I do want to acknowledge that, importantly, we do need to have some conversations with Tangata Whenua around those criteria. At the moment, we've got cultural values included in the criteria for outstanding water bodies, but we are, want to acknowledge that we know that that's not necessarily reflective of a Te Ao Māori view in terms of hierarchy of water bodies. So it is something we need to work through with Tangata Whenua. We don't have to include cultural values. That's something that is totally a decision for council and its communities to make. But the next steps, I guess, for outstanding water bodies is to continue those conversations with Tangata Whenua, to have a look at the criteria, to get some assessments done on the existing outstanding water bodies to see how they stack up against these new criteria. And I think we probably do need to wait until we get the actual MPS landing, hopefully, as Steve said earlier, hopefully later this year, just to see whether they change direction again on us, because the last couple of MPSs have had what might appear to be minor wording changes, but relatively significant impacts on how you go about doing your outstanding water body assessment. So that's a piece of work that's underway, and staff will keep working on that as we can. The other component in this paper is an update on the BEDS chapter. So that basically deals with all the regulation of in-stream structures in our region, everything that falls under Section 13 of the RMA at the moment. So our existing plan has pretty good coverage on this, but we have tried to focus the outcome of our redrafting and refinement on a few key outcomes, being that we want to reduce the complexity where we can for this framework. We've got to align with some national guidance. The paper talks a little bit to some of the confusing and complex relationships between MPSs and NESs and things like that in the space of in-stream structures at the moment. We want to prioritise fish passage, and we brought that topic to you all last meeting. Minimise disturbance in the plan, in the streams, and ensure that we've got a rule framework that's easy to implement, so that people understand what they need to get consent for and perhaps what they don't. So we've included in the paper a little bit of a draft activity description classification as to how that's shaping up. So all of the activities, I guess, in this chapter will start with either a permitted or controlled pathway, pending meeting certain requirements around things like outstanding water bodies, habitats of threatened species, effects on Waitapu sites, archaeological sites, structural limitations, those kind of things. And then if they can't meet those standards, then they'll flick up into either a restricted discretionary or discretionary framework. So we're currently doing a lot of work internally at the moment on that chapter with our consents and compliance teams to make sure that what we are starting to think about in terms of that structure works for them and will work for them on the ground. And we're also have just sent some of those draftings off to our Potaya colleagues as well to get their input onto how those types of things are starting to shape up as well. So just a bit of an update, I guess, on those 2 topics so that when we bring them back to you in more detail, you'll have a little bit of a base understanding of where they've started from. And just the other thing to note that the last 6 weeks has been a pretty busy period for the team in working with iwi too. We've obviously keep working very closely with Madia on the work that she helps us do, but we've also held some hui with the individual iwi potaya on a number of topics, including earthworks, contaminated land, desirable, undesirable fish species, and yesterday I had a really good initial conversation around water allocation too. So we'll continue to be doing that work and delving into some of the more complex topics, I think, given we've got a little bit more time now too. So happy to have any questions or queries from people from the content of that paper.
Kia ora, thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appendix 1, where it's got criteria for identifying outstanding water bodies, just help me understand, please. It's got the values that the bodies are going to be assessed by, and I think it must carry at least one of those values to be identified as outstanding. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Chair. And the structure that we've adopted here is something that's recently gone through Hawke's Bay, an Environment Court decision, which separated criteria, I guess, out into two components. So you'll see under the thresholds, it's got list A. The screening criteria contain a list A, and of which they must meet at least one of those criterion. So often the list A will have 2 or 3 different criteria that they must meet. They have to meet at least one, not all 3 of those. But for list B, it must meet all of the criteria that's set there. And list B, I guess, typically is that we're supporting those kind of decisions by evidence in the first instance, or there might be some other kind of criteria where we're saying, actually, this is a non-negotiable. We must be seeing the evidence on these things under list B. So it's a component selection for list A and then must meet all criteria under list B. The current MPS says that it must just meet one value to be outstanding, and it would be considered an outstanding water body. The previous MPS kind of said, actually, you need to kind of look across the whole value set, and it probably implied that you probably need to meet more than one for it to be outstanding. So that's the kind of direction that we kind of do need from the government at the moment as to where they're going to land in the new MPS. It will change the number of water bodies you might ultimately end up with sitting in outstanding water body classification.
Madam Chair, if I could please, just to help me understand it a bit more. So is this replacing the, I guess what's a value, the swimmable thing we used to hear about and the non-swimmable, and what's happening to that lot? Do we know?
No, through you, Chair, this is the complex nature of freshwater management through plans systems, I guess. So those values you just spoke about there, they are contained within the National Objectives Framework, which is a framework that applies across all water bodies. And that is, I guess, something that the more recent versions of the MPS have continued to build on. So I guess you could think about it from the perspective of those values lift the bar of freshwater management across the board to certain standards for those different attributes that are sitting in that framework. What outstanding water bodies do, and typically outstanding water bodies should only be, a handful of water bodies, 1 or 2, 3, within your region where you say, actually, there's something quite unique for the region here. It might be rare. There could be a particular type of species that you're like, this is not occurring anywhere else in our region and it's really high quality. We're going to give them a little bit more of a protection. They're typically a higher level of protection afforded to those water bodies that fall into that framework. An example of that is in our current plan with the Hankatahua, which has a very high level of protection through the current plan. So I guess there's 2 components that will be happening in the future plan as you'll be lifting the bar on all those other values that NOF contain, but then you'll if you're continuing with the outstanding water bodies framework, you'll also be providing additional protection to those few that might fall into that framework as well.
Very much, Madam Chair.
Tuhiao, and then back to Donna, and then Mitch.
Kia ora, Lisa. This isn't a question. I just wanted to actually take a moment to just to thank you and also Steve and Finbay and the team, because the papers today are massive, but you've really articulated them really well and summed it up and given us good summaries and options to look at. And I can see the consultation with our people is really happening. So just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Donna, and then Mitch.
Mine was, can we just be clear, because these tables and what's permitted and what's not. So we know that we've got some big fish passage fix-ups to do with culverts. Will that allow that to happen in an easy way?
Yes.
Yep.
through you, Madam Chair. One of the key things we've been trying to think about, particularly in this structure and this chapter, and Bridget's in the room, and she might be able to describe it better than me because she's the one that's been drafting it, is to really make sure the plan is not a barrier for when people have remediation work to be doing on fish passage. Because at the moment, the current plan, it can take too long to get through that process sometimes when you're actually, the outcome you're trying to achieve is of benefit to freshwater management and the landowner as well. So that's been front and centre, and you can kind of see it, I guess, with a lot of the that entry rule being permitted for a lot of those activities that are in that table under paragraph 24. There's obviously requirements they need to meet to make sure that we are permitting activities that we're confident will have a no more than minor effect, but we are definitely trying to make sure that the plan's not the barrier.
So just to explain, if it's permitted, they can go ahead and do it, or do they have to advise the council? How does?
No, through you, Chair, if it's permitted, they can go ahead and do, as long as they're within those standards that the permitted rule sets up.
Okay, and the other one is probably for stormwater, like if they want to put a bigger culvert in, which is good for us all. Would that work as well in that permitted activity?
There are, and Bridget will know this better than me in terms of the detail, but there are some restrictions within the national environmental standards for freshwater around size of culverts as to whether you're permitted or not. So, but again, as long as you're within those sizing requirements, then you can be permitted. If you tip over bigger than that, then you're a consented framework.
Thank you.
Mitch and then Leda.
I've just noticed in terms of the outstanding water bodies that there was that council will embark on engagement process with iwi, but it doesn't necessarily outline what that process is. I'm just wanting to confirm that it's the same as what's proposed in the beds and the same as what's been going or happening through the freshwater.
Yes, through you, Chair. The engagement process that we'll be running on outstanding water bodies is similar to all of the other topics, where we've been seeking the direction and guidance, I guess, from Maria in the first instance. We then take these types of papers and details to have a hui with the potaiao. If potaiao need for us to go and talk to hapu or to bring hapu members into those conversations, we do. And then obviously back up through the Y steering group once we get some kind of direction through that process. If we can't find direction as well, I guess that's the other role for the Y steering group too, to help advise us in that process.
Leda, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I have a question around gravel. So I don't know who can answer it, but I'm wondering around gravel extraction and the build-up of gravel, how that can affect flooding, how that works in our plan. Like, see that it's controlled around any removal of gravel that would disturb a bed, but if you're removing things that aren't disturbing beds, is that just do that better, or how does that work around gravel and floods?
So through you, Madam Chair, currently you're able to, farmers are enabled to take certain amounts of gravel, with conditions applied. But that's a matter going forward that we need to look at as well.
Any other comments or questions? Lisa, I just had a query on page 356, E number 3, sediment of water bodies within Waihi Tupuna from earthworks. Is that supposed to be Waihi Tapu?
Yes.
Okay, kapai.
Thank you, we'll update that.
That's okay. And my other question on page 360, where it talks about the advisory group seeking more lenient conditions while iwi seek more restrictive. Do we ever get them together to talk to each other about, why and where and try to come up with a consensus, or is that left to staff to try and navigate through the middle of that?
Through you, Chair, to date we haven't, but I think that for some of these topics, that can be something that we're definitely open to get people together to try and work through that. If particularly if staff feel like we can't do that alone, but to date we haven't done those processes.
I think it's worth considering getting some of these interest groups together sometimes to help when there's such disparate views.
Yes.
Any other kōrero comments, Elisa? No, then can I please have a mover for the recommendation on page 342 that we receive the update on the freshwater implementation program? I have a mover. Thank you, Craig. Seconder. Thank you, Alan. All in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried.
And could I, with your forbearance, Madam Chair, note that this is the last meeting for Lisa?
Oh.
She has admirably helped our transition towards the new policy manager called Anne Duncan, who starts on Monday. From a staff perspective, we sincerely thank you for your services, the development you've shown, the way you've delivered messages, and so on. And you may also like to talk about your new job in Australia by way of informing members here. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred. Likewise, it's been a pleasure to work for TRC. I've loved it. So, but yes, we are now based in Australia, and I will be starting a new role in a couple of weeks with the Victorian Traditional Owners Corporation as their Senior Natural Resource Advisor. So, really keen to be starting to work in that space over here in Victoria. So yeah, thank you everybody. I won't be able to help myself. I will be watching the progression of the freshwater plan online. I know I will be. So all the best everybody, and you'll be in safe hands with Anne, I'm sure. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for the important work you're about to embark on too. It's really critical for our brothers and sisters across the ditch. Hilda. But are you leading us through the next?
I will be online. I will stay here, but I'm going to hand over to Hannah's going to take you through the earthworks chapter, and then Bridget's going to take you through the damming and diversions chapter. But I will remain online so I can help out with any questions or queries.
Okay, thank you. Kilda, welcome.
Kilda. Thank you for having me back again. I'm Hannah, one of the plan consultants that's assisting the policy team with the plan drafting. You would have received in the agenda quite a substantial paper sort of going through the intricate detail of the journey to date with the earthworks chapter and sort of what we're looking at in terms of some options for progression, and obviously those options will be further impacted with the change that's coming from central government over time. I thought if we pop on to 400 slides today. Great. So I thought just to keep things really nice and brief, I'd just focus on a couple of key things to highlight from the paper. So getting into the detail of why some change in the way that we're managing earthworks currently is needed. There's a regulatory gap where the potential effects on the environment may not be adequately addressed. So the current regional freshwater plan for Taranaki only manages the discharge of stormwater and sediment from earthworks activities, not the actual soil disturbance as an activity in of itself. More modern planning practice is to have some level of management on the activity in addition to the discharge, as opposed to just having management controls on the discharge. The second reason is that our science work is showing that reductions in sediment load are required to meet outcomes, and climate change could make meeting those reductions even more challenging in the future. Through our discussions with Tangata Whenua, the identification of Waitapu and Waitaonga sites and how earthwork activities can be managed to provide protection and appropriate management for those sites is an important thing that we need to consider. And in response to, I guess, addressing these issues, it's important that we ensure any approach to earthworks is risk-based and that any scale holds that we refer to are really targeted and practical. In a nutshell, I guess we're trying to only require resource consents where the risk of sediment runoff and things is high. So there's a range of levers that we can utilise for that. And it's, just trying to ensure that the end framework that we come up is fit for purpose in that way. So we've looked at a couple of options. So option one is status quo. So it's continuing to just manage the discharge of sediment-laden water from earthworks activities as we currently do under the regional plan. The second option that we've been doing quite a bit of work on has sort of been developed a bit over time. So at the heart of that option is adopting a risk-based approach to managing earthworks and the discharge of sediment-laden water. At a really high level, this framework looks to permit some earthworks that are considered lower risk, so things, earthworks that are sort of on flat, far away from water bodies, and require resource consents as a restricted discretionary activity where the risk is greater. So as slope goes up, as volumes get higher, as we become closer to surface water bodies and that sort of thing, we think that in those cases there is a need for a resource consent to be required, but a restricted discretionary activity status sort of provides a really targeted list of matters that the council would be able to sort of require information on and that sort of thing. So in terms of requiring resource consent, it's sort of at that lower end. We prefer option 2 because it responds to the issues that we've identified with the framework to date, and the levers that we're sort of looking at including in that framework will require earthworks being undertaken in a way that minimises the loss of sediment to water, require adherence to erosion sediment control plans in some circumstances, and will require some setback distances to surface water bodies and drinking water supplies and that sort of thing as well. I'll also note, as part of option 2 as well, we're also investigating whether there's a potential pathway for small-scale earthwork activities on farm to be managed under a freshwater farm plan regime. So that's aligned with the primary production work stream that's going on.
At the end?
That's the end.
Ah.
Happy to do any questions on paper.
Okay, great.
Through you, Chair, just one question I have is that what you're proposing, which I think is great, is what sort of effect can you see that having on stuff like forestry?
Yes, yeah, so through you, Chair. So forestry, currently we've got an EES for commercial forestry that obviously overrides any sort of regional rules that we put in place. In general, that EES is, and all indications is that it's probably going to be less restrictive than what we're currently used to. For the likes of non-commercial forestry and that sort of thing, this type of framework would apply. So it would apply in cases where it's not otherwise required by the EES. Does that sort of make sense? So
I guess my question is, who's regulating this? Will there be a step up?
Yes, correct. There will be. So for commercial forestry regulation, the EES is their go-to in terms of the rules and things. That is the council's compliance team which manage that, and in some cases there are resource consents that foresters require under the EES, which the consents team here at council processing things. Yes, correct. Yeah.
So through you, Chair, so my question probably to the CE is that is there enough resource for actually, do you see an increase in monitoring happening under this proposal?
Through
well, have you actually got enough resource for doing that effectively?
Correct. So through you, Chair, under the framework there will be more resource consents required, and as a result of that, more resource consents to monitor. That's probably as far as I can take it in terms of saying that yes, the proposed framework that we would likely look at would increase the amount of resource consents and monitoring requirements, but the
resourcing, well, some of that will generate revenue anyway in terms of fee revenue, and the resourcing issue will need to be addressed as part of the final plan policy making process. We'll need to look at that in a holistic way once we have a complete draft plan and the overall approaches.
And just finally through your Chair, so with all that happening, will there be more monitoring sites, like for example out east, where you can actually look at that quality of, because we don't have a lot of it's probably UAB.
So that is something we're actually looking at the moment. So we're currently looking at we've got those gaps in the network. We have a modest amount of funding that council committed to in the last So yes, we will be, but just managing expectations around how many other sites we might be able to have until we get a clearer picture of where we can actually put them in and Yeah, yeah, but we'll cover it with a bit of an outline.
Thank you, Webby. So we've got Donna and then Alan.
The first thing is sediment to council, but it's topsoil to primary production, and it's a really valuable asset that everybody tries to keep on the land. The second is that we can't control the sediment coming off the mountain, and that is a big issue around the ring plain. The one thing I just wondered, a definition of cultivation and earthworks as well, like fencing rather than, just little things like fencing rather than fence posts. But
yeah.
What concerned me when you talk about 10 metres, like I can think of where we've got sediment traps at home, and especially where you're going to bridges, like in Taranaki, just about everything goes downhill to a bridge. And so where we've put sediment traps in, they are within 10 metres of a stream, but they're stopping sediment going to a stream. So I think we've got to be careful that we don't end up, and there'll be other kind of types of things like sediment traps that could really make quite a difference to fresh water, that we've got to be really careful we don't limit. And I guess the other thing is what's large earthworks and what's small, and I know that came up, like races under the first definition meant that a farmer couldn't maintain a race. So I guess that's still relevant. But for me, I would really like to see as much in freshwater farm plans as we possibly can, because we know that education is the first and best line of improvement.
Yes, through you, Chair. Very mindful of not trying to disincentivise people going out and doing good things like installing sediment traps and that sort of those sorts of works. And the point you raise as well around the actual metrics, it's all very well saying this is what the threshold is going to be, and this is what we're going to have a setback for this, but actually the metrics are a really important part of that, and through our engagement there's been really varied views on what those actual metrics should be. I think as we sort of continue on with this particular topic, having some more time to refine what those metrics are and be able to provide pathways for those enabling measures is something that I want to focus on.
Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, I was more worried about that. I think you've answered my question with regard to the metrics. I was more worried about, as you say, a farmer not being able to do a race or harrow his paddocks or put in some crops or something, doing those sorts of things. But if they actively managed it with sediment traps, and if they are too close, I think they're doing their job right. I'd hate to think it's that restrictive. They have to get a consent every time they want to do something on their farm.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, just with the investigation work we're doing with what could end up going through in the freshwater farm plan approach, that's where you have the local, you've got the specific on-farm information to be able to make some more informed choices as opposed to something that's blanket.
So the metrics may become a preferred guideline, perhaps, rather than a hard and fast rule, depending on individual circumstances and landscape?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other queries or questions? Thank you. Can I have a mover, please, that we accept the recommendations on page 353? Grant, seconder. Craig, all in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you, team. Kia ora. Okay, we're getting there. 11, the management of damming and diversion within the land, draft land. Start again. Actually, number 11. Who's up? Kia ora.
Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget.
I'm Bridget Huttard, and I'm going to give a quick overview of the damming and diversions paper. I'm going to take the paper as read, but I'll also give a quick overview using this presentation. So the issues in this space are, we we know that damming and diversions can have environmental impacts on things like reduced river flow, degraded fish habitats, and warmer temperatures that can encourage pest species. Our current plan has a few gaps in that it potentially doesn't reflect the expectations of tangata whenua as well as it could, and also it maybe doesn't align with national direction as well as it could. There's also been confusion around what counts as a diversion, which becomes tricky when you're trying to differentiate between a take and a diversion, which has been difficult in practice. So what are we proposing? So we're proposing to clearly define a diversion as the redirection of water within the bed of a river or lake. So this distinguishes it from a water take, which would be that as soon as the water leaves the bed, it becomes a take. So that's something we're proposing or thinking of. And second, we're tightening up the rules a bit. So in-stream damming would now require a consent unless it's temporary. And off-stream dams we're proposing would be permitted for things like water storage. We're also investigating the use of a clear control pathway for flood control works. Yes, so something which is probably more of a stylistic choice, but we're proposing to put the placement rules of a dam in the same chapter as the rules around damming and diversion, because the two activities are so synonymous with each other. So it's just easier than use. So yeah, so have a rules table here to make things a bit clearer. So yeah, just some key things is like, for example, we're proposing that temporary in-stream dams are permitted. That should allow in-stream works to occur, but only if they meet certain conditions. And off-stream dams, we're also proposing that they're permitted to enable things like water storage. But permanent in-stream dams, we're proposing that those would generally require a consent. Yeah, so I'm happy to take questions.
Peter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paragraph 19, I'm not sure what page it is, and item C, it says water storage for commercial gain is not supported. So how would that impact on farming?
I'm sorry. I have to
Because, Madam Chair, if I may, I think that's a vital question for the economy of our region that needs to be well considered.
That's under the, sorry, Peter, under the tangata whenua expectations, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I mean, commercial gain, farming is for commercial gain, and if water storage for commercial gain is not supported, then that's going to have an immediate impact on our economy. I think that should be reconsidered.
So that's a conversation staff can have further with iwi.
Through you, Chair, if I could just maybe add a little bit of clarification on that too. Yeah, we can definitely have further discussions with tangata whenua around those expectations that have come through some of the management plans. The other thing just to note too is that, so that everyone's clear, is that whilst the damming structure itself for off-stream storage might be a permitted process, the take of the water to fill it is part of that take chapter and would need to be within the framework that we're crafting at the moment around water allocation. So and there is a fine balance when we bring water allocation back to you. There is a fine balance, I guess, around the role that storage can play in our region, around potentially taking pressure off streams during low flow periods if people have actually invested in storage and are enabled to take water at high flow to fill their storage dams. So it is quite a it's quite a balancing act, I guess, to work through that. And part of that considerations will be the economic impact of how all of that framework hangs together, that we'll need to be considering when we're drafting up our Section 32s as well.
Thank you. Leadham and then Donna.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question around diversion of water and any low flow hydroelectric schemes that might go in. Would they be caught up in that being a permitted activity if that was being diverted for the purpose of running through a hydroelectric?
I believe that would be through the take framework.
It's going around.
So
it's coming back to Taranaki, gets diverted, goes around and then comes back.
I think under our proposed definition, I'd have to know a proper example, but I think under our proposed definition, as soon as it leaves the bed, it's a take and a discharge. So then we're able to better account for that flow.
It would be a non-consumptive.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, the advantage is the same way in terms of but it's just a water account that's coming out at one point that's being taken and then it's being put back in, but it's non-consumptive, you know.
Maybe I guess the amount, the volume might be part of it, because it's only going to be a small volume of water.
So I guess my question is that amongst all of the things that we're looking at, are we looking at
We're considering that.
Permissive for people to be able to do activities like that?
I think that will be addressed under the takes framework. That's
Great question though. Thank you. Donna?
Mine was the same.
Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, Susan.
This suggestion about water storage for commercial gain is not supported is under the tangata whenua part of the paper. Should it not also include federated farmers and people like that? Because, I mean, the point that Peter makes is bang on the money that farming is a commercial activity. So if they're if they're retaining water for commercial gain, surely they should have a voice in that discussion.
We are part, sorry.
Yeah, don't.
We
I
are
was-
part of that. Right. Okay.
And maybe this might be another example of when those collective voices can be brought together for a wider discussion around perspectives, because everyone wants the same outcome. It's just how we approach those outcomes.
And if I could just add, Madam Chair, I appreciate it's under the tongue of the Whenua concerns, but you know, we have PKW.
It's a regional, yeah.
So we have those concerns.
Okay. Mitch?
Just wanted to know if there's a definition for temporary. What I see is just temporary versus permanent.
Yeah.
So for me, it's saying anything that's not permanent is potentially temporary.
Yeah, so we'd have to figure out an appropriate time frame. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but the new national direction that came out, the new package, they're talking about temporary culverts, and those culverts they're talking around 60 days, something like that. So maybe we would go with what's being presented nationally, or maybe we would come up with our own definition of what temporary was. We can investigate that further as a team, but I haven't got down to the details of.
Is that clarity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other conversation, questions? Thank you, team. That's great information. Thanks, guys. Can we have a mover for the recommendations on page 371 and 372, please? Susan, can I have a seconder? Leadham, all in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Go well.
I will. Thank you very much. All the best, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. We're now moving into public excluded. I'd like to move that we move into public excluded. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Neil. All in favour, please say aye. Any against? It's carried. We'll just allow some time